That makes it all worth the effort, doesn't it? The sight of those cars is wiggling up the apron. Hello and welcome to Dubai Trains. And today we're going to finish the build on the Walthers car float and matching apron kit. At the end of the video, I'm going to go a bit more detail how to operate, how I'm going to operate the car float. Let's first finish the build and the assembly. So here is where we left off. I still needed to paint the top structure. And I think the top structure is this really old galvanized steel that over time did start to rust a bit and faded into this very light color. So how I approached this, I first put a primer of silver on the top structure, and then I basically, well, not dry brush, but with almost a dry brush, a little bit wet brush, painted white paint onto the steel. And as you see, as for the picture, I made note not to paint where the windows are. That was somehow more grayish and less white. Then I added a lot of rust to it, just with my burnt umber and burnt sienna color mix. And mostly, as you see, on the top, where the rust would be. Now to tie it all in, I used the washes, because now it's just still too much contrast between the different colors. So I used a wash of that exact same rusty color. I just added water to that rusty mix and used that as a wash, just to keep the number of colors that I'm using a little bit down as well. Now for the apron bridge itself, it also needed the wash. I did a very light wash of black at the end. I might go back and do a bit of a heavier wash and then some weathering with the pastel chalks there. But for an initial wash, that's great. And I used a more brown wash for the in between the steel of the girder bridge section. And I used the same colors for the wash for the concrete area, but like I said, it's a bit light when it dried up, so I might do that again because you don't really see it that much. And you see just the amount of water before it all dried of the wash, and then those steel plates are just totally saturated. This needed a good half day, almost a day, just to dry out. So now we have all the components, and it's just a matter of assembly. I already added some tabs to my bench work, so that the structure, the apron, would sit exactly in the same place every time and match up with the track. And that is also very rigid. In the end, we're going to be throwing a switch on that apron, and it needs to sit very rigid in the same place, otherwise the track's not going to line up. And then cue the Jaws music. The barge. That was a lot of fun to paint that thing. So the barge lines up, and they use these, I don't know, like lock rods or lock pins. As you see the guy here, the footage, shoving it into place to ensure that the lineup is correct. And the model has it as well, but after applying all that paint, they were a bit difficult to fill in there. But that actually worked out well, because here I used quite a lot of force to push it all together. But that means that when you throw the turnout, it all stays exactly in place. And that's exactly what I wanted. You see here, if I just reposition the barge a bit, that everything moves in tandem. So I did that once. That also lines up on the shore side. And yeah, to really minimize the amount of derailments, to really get that all nicely lined up. And then here we have the bridge structure. Let's put it on top of the steel. Yeah, and that finishes off the entire build. I think this fits in nicely right here. Still don't know which material the prototype is made from, but I'm quite happy how it turned out. And wow, what a build this was. It was really fun to do, and it challenged a lot of my skills, most notably the extreme rust painting. Now there's a lot of detail in here. It's difficult to catch on camera somehow, a lot more than you can really see on film. But it is it turned out well. I'm happy with it. And it's also a lot of fun to operate, as you see in the images here as well. Now, a few things to note. Okay, there's always an exception for every prototype, but how I'm going to operate, I'm going to use these handle cars. They were sometimes gondolas like this, and sometimes they were flat cars. And they used this because the engine was often not allowed, because of trackage rights, on the apron and or on the car float. So I didn't really have much to do with the weight of the engine. I'm sure the float and the apron, if it's in good condition, can handle the weight of the engines, but it was add more to the tracks, right? So that's how I'm going to operate. I think that also adds a little bit more interest into operating and storytelling when you explain to folks how this all works. Now for the operations, there are different ways in the prototype how they did this. But you do need to make sure that the barge doesn't flip while you're sailing, obviously, and also while you load and unload it. So when offloading the barge, they take the tracks at the sides, the most left and the most right one first, and then they do the one in the middle and last. One variation could be that you half unload the sides first. So first you do the 2 cars on the left, then you pull the entire string on the right, then you get the other 2 cars on the left, and then do the cars in the middle. But that's just a bit too fiddly for my taste, so I just take the entire left side, entire right side, and then the cars in the middle. The heaviest cars were also in the middle, so you can get as nitty-gritty as you want with this. You can go and check which cars are empty on that run and which ones are full and spot them like that. For now, I'm just going to keep in mind the sequence of loading and offloading, and because the float fits exactly 5 40-foot cars, sometimes we have 50-foot cars. There's also some thinking you have to do there to make sure it all fits on the barge, and leave it at that. And that's already actually quite fun and quite a task to do. And I'm really happy also that I trimmed the float. That was a bit of an ongoing debate. The float is about 1 car length shorter. I still need to trim the layout a bit. It's not going to be anything spectacular. It's going to be about this dimension that you can see that I can take off. And there's going to be some rocks here and some more corrugated steel here. There's a lot to do on that scenery side of things. We just basically build the kits, and that's going to be that for this segment. I'm going to build the coal trestle. That has to be in this pile right here. And then why am I doing those 2 things first? Well, because they both require some earth-scaping work. So here on the coal trestle side, and then quite obviously here, and then matching up with these 3 girder bridges, or 1 double deck girder bridge and 1 single track girder bridge that need to be made here with some more landscaping. So that's going to be an entirely separate thing. And I'm thinking to paint my water. I don't really want to use resin. And another reason not to use resin is because the float will then come up because the resin has a substantial thickness and paint doesn't. Now this model can still use a bit more weathering with chalks. That's something we're going to do later. As you saw, I weathered this, but you don't really see much of it anymore. It's a little bit here, the rust, but I think this can probably just use another wash, to be honest. A bit more darker grayish mess. And I don't have the guts to put a wash on the float yet. I don't know if it needs it yet. I don't really want it to be black and stained, because floats get very wet, so it's not going to be dirty. So it's not going to be a dark wash, maybe a rusty wash, just to tie it all in together. But for now, I'm just going to leave it like this. I'm going to enjoy it, and we'll take a little bit of a break from this whole float apron section, because it was quite a build. If you want to know which kits I used and which colors I used, check down below. I'll put the links there where you can find it on eBay. And thank you guys all very much for watching. That's the end of the car float build for now. Bye bye.